Hey guys, uh, this is Ryan from Water Games, and today in this live stream what I'm going to do is show how to set up a stone golem that I showed off in a teaser trailer a couple hours ago, that will shoot a line of rocks at the player if they get too close. And in addition, I'm going to kind of go over a little bit about how to set up an ICE AI using A-star pathfinding, because a couple of people have asked about that, and it's a little bit better than this version using Unity's nav mesh system currently with ICE, because Pit has yet to fix the sliding issue when the creatures stop. But for whatever reason, A-star does not have that issue, and the creature will stop when the creature is no longer moving or supposed to not move. I will also go over some kind of some simple scripts which should help with some of your ice creatures as well. A script that will allow you to deactivate and reactivate certain weapon colliders, which is especially going to be useful if your creature has body parts which you only want active during its attack. And I will also kind of go over, what was that other script I had? Mind going blank on that one. Dang it. Well, anyway, I will probably also go over setting up, because in the video, if any of you watched it, the golem was actually reacting to the hill that it was sitting on, and its limbs were placed appropriately, and it wasn't clipping through the terrain or anything like that. And I was using Root Motion's final IK system on him, and I will also kind of quickly go over setting that up with the golem as well, so you can see how that works and interacts with ice, which is fairly easy because ice just controls kind of the animations and generally won't interfere with things like final IK and whatnot, since it's not its own IK system. So let me hop over to Unity. All right, so in this scene, I created a little smaller and with less visual effects than the scene that I had in the video, because you'll notice if you watched it, you'll notice that it was a tad bit laggy and slow on the responsive side. So I made one that was a little simpler so that we get less lag when we do things. So the assets that I'm going to be using in this tutorial video or more of an informational video, are Root Motion's final IK. Forgot to put that in the link on the forum. The Islanders Golem pack, Golem Mobile, or you could also just use the normal Golem pack if you have it as well, and the magical particle effect system to generate the line of rocks. All right. So here I used Gaia to generate this land. And some people have asked about how it interacts with ice, and it's just like Final IK, the terrain isn't going to make a big difference on ice at all. It's no different than if you just use the normal terrain tools Unity offers, because the end result is just a terrain. I don't have Gaia in my scene because I took it out because this is the final result that I wanted. So I'll quickly go over how to set this terrain, Gaia generated terrain, up for ice, which is fairly easy. All you want to do here is, well, a couple of things we want to do here first is we want to grab the terrain, go to layer, add layer, and we want to define a walkable terrain layer that our creatures are going to navigate across. And in this, ice just kind of uses the walkable layer. but you could name it anything you want so long as you assign it in the creature register once you set it up. That's the important part, is setting the layer. So just as an example, I'm just going to name this as the terrain layer. Assuming that's how it's spelled. I'm horrible at spelling, sorry. And then we want to set kind of an obstacle layer normally, but I'm not entirely sure we need an obstacle layer for this. So I'll just leave that out. If we do, then I'll add it in later. So what we want to do is create the ICE register. Not there. Click on the wizard, and then you can just click add creature register. And then at this point, we have the terrain. You can generate a terrain with ICE, which is better than nothing. But since we already have one generated, we're not going to go ahead and use this. So we're not going to click generate or anything. And we already have a ground layer, and we're not using an obstacle layer, so we're not going to necessarily bother with those. But what we will do is go into the creature register here, find world settings, extend this out a little bit here, and we want ground handling to be raycast. And we want to add in the terrain layer that we defined. Water handling, obstacle avoidance, none, so that's all fine. Good. So let me go back to the creature control wizard, see if I can actually use, yeah, okay, so now I can add the creature. All right, so I do have a, let me find him here, a rigid body FPS controller here, which we'll use as the player for the golem to interact with. So what I want to do here is go back into the creature control, the wizard, and add my player object in there under this player tab. And then it will automatically add the ICE creature player script to it, which you could just do manually as well. You don't have to open this wizard and drag it in there. If you wanted to add it manually, you could just go to add component and ICE creature player here, which will add that to the object as well. So here we want our player to actually take damage when he gets hit by the golem, because that's kind of the whole purpose. So what we're going to do is we're going to enable the status and enable the durability, and we'll leave it at 100. You could make a tougher player if you wanted to, but for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to leave it at the default of 100. And you can use set a corpse and whatnot, but we're not going to do that in this video. Maybe in another tutorial video, I will go over how to set up things like rigid bodies, and maybe special corpse effects and things like that with using ICE creatures and even ICE third-person players. But for now, we're just going to set up the golem and whatnot. All right, so we got our player set up here. So what we're going to do now is kind of grab our golem character that we're going to set up with ICE. So let me go into my models, characters, islander, golem, prefab, and we'll find a stone golem in here. Rock. I like this guy better. All right, so we got our golem in here, and I'm going to rename him to ICE Golem. Save that off. And he comes with, he's generic, so he'll need an animator controller with some animations in it. And one thing I don't like is this little mask, so I'm actually going to just delete that. There, now I don't have a mask. All right, so we have the creature register. So now we need to set up the golem. And the easiest way to do that, to set up all the default fields, is to go into the wizard and set up through there. But first we need to set up his animations. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is create folder for animation controllers. And then I'm going to create a animation controller for the golem. And then open that, and then find the little guy's animations. Which I believe is in source, right? Yes. I'm gonna just click and drag all of them in there. Rearrange them so they're easier to see. All right. So our golem's going to have ultimately two attack animations. One where he slams the ground and sends out the shock, the stones, and one where he just pounds on the player if they get too close, or too close to the golem for it to effectively use the rock wall attack. Doesn't necessarily need a death or a hit, or even a spawn for that matter, but later on you can set those up for when the player damages them or another AI damages them. But for now, we're not going to worry about those. We're just going to worry about the attack, idle, walk, and walk, basically. But for future videos, I'm just going to leave those in there. All right, so we have, this is pretty much all you need to do to set up the animation controller to use with ICE, because you can just have ICE control directly which animation state it's going to be playing. And so you could have it a little more complex and add transitions and whatnot and parameters, and you can set up ICE to use those parameters. But for this one, we're just going to keep it simple and use the direct method. So go ahead and assign the animation controller to our ICE Golem in the scene. Go back, and now we can actually go ahead and set him up with the necessary scripts and settings. So we'll open up the ICE creature wizard, go to creature, click and drag our ICE Golem into the area. And the golem is actually a quadruped and not a biped, because he does walk on all fours. Walking speed, he's relatively slow, so I'm gonna start him off at like 2. Turning, I've found for the most natural result for turning speed to be about a 2 for most creatures. Unless it's an incredibly nimble creature, it's going to be relatively slow at turning while it's moving or anything else. So it's idle animation. We want to be idle. Walk will be walk, and run will also be walk. This golem doesn't know how to run. Too heavy. Now, I'd imagine golems really don't eat much of anything, so I'm going to leave it at undefined for that. And then I'm actually going to go ahead and click generate. We'll manually set up its attack animations and behaviors. So for now, we'll click generate. And you'll see that ICE added a home for the golem, which will be where it wanders around in. Creature register, you'll notice also that it's added the ICE Golem and the home to the reference objects. Now, one great thing you can do with this is you can set this to groups so that you can see better the categories that are in your scene. So right now we have 1 creature, 1 player, and 1 location in our scene. That's pretty much all that's going to show for the moment. We will set up body parts and whatnot for the golem so that it can actually interact with us. All right, so now the first thing we want to do is go into runtime behavior. and untick use hierarchy management. This is especially important to do if you're going to manually mess around with its hierarchy through scripts and whatnot. But it's also immensely important to untick this box for any body parts that you create. Otherwise, the body parts will unparent themselves from the creature, and you will have some really odd results as creatures' body parts are stretched out and not moving along with the creature. It's also important for like handheld weapons as well, because you don't want the hierarchy management active. Otherwise, the weapon will become unequipped or something like that. All right, so let's just make sure that motion and pathfinding is all set. So by default, the motion controls are set to internal. We're going to ultimately change this to use the A* pathfinding. But for now, that doesn't really matter. We want to make sure that its behaviors and other stuff are correctly set up first. So we'll go into status. This doesn't matter so much either because we're not going to be hurting him. But behaviors, he has all of these, so we want to make sure that these are all set correctly. Yes, set to loop, events, fine, run. It doesn't really matter because we're not really going to use the run animation. But walk, we want to make sure is fine. Attack. Like I said, we're going to be redoing the attack here. These all look fine, so let's actually go ahead and create a second attack here. I'm actually going to go ahead and rename this one to basic attack. Because this is where he'll basically just punch the player. And then special attack. We want to add a new one. There. Now, I believe this special attack is attack 2. Yes. So we need to set that to use the attack 2 animation. So animation direct, yes, we want direct, and we want attack 2. Do we want it loop? We'll go with default for now, see how that looks. Might have to make it loop later on to avoid some weird looking effects. Now for that, that's all we're going to set up for now. Basic attack. We do have to set up the basic attacks animation, and it's attack 1. Good. Yes, and it's also important to make sure that all your attack animations have a viewing direction of center. This will allow them to face their target as they're attacking. So that's immensely important. Otherwise, your creature will stay in one direction while it's attacking. And if your player moves off to the side or something like that, or the creature attacks in a weird way, it could just end up look like it's attacking, but attacking in the wrong direction. All right, all those are fine. So now we can actually go ahead and add interactors. Although for now, I think what we're going to do is not worry about that. We do have to go into status for now, though, and scroll all the way down to Sensora. Activate that so that he actually has a field of view and whatnot. I'm actually going to narrow this guy's field of view a little bit. I'm actually going to narrow it down to about 100 degrees. And set his visual range to about 30 so that he can't see off into infinity, spot you all the way across the map and come after you. That's not very realistic. I believe that's all we got to set there. Yes. Alright, so Now, if you want to see that kind of stuff, all you have to do is take the debug, and you can actually see his cone of vision and the range. All right. So now there's a couple of other things that we got to do to get this golem working the way we want him to. We need to give him a special weapon, which will be a ranged weapon, so that he can shoot the line of rocks at us. But first, we need to actually set up the line of rocks. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into, I have to go into the part effects, magical, see if they're in, no, they're not going to be in sources. All right. Let me find. I already have them. No, I don't. Okay, good. Components, I believe they are. Here it is. Yeah, so this is going to be, in a way, the projectile. Although it's actually going to be a weird projectile in that it's basically just going to be a static projectile. It's going to pop up from the ground and just sit there. So let's go ahead and drag that into the scene so we can see it. So this is actually what's going to damage the player or other AI. Once it hits or triggers, once something runs into it, essentially. So what we want to do is, in this particular case, I've already gone ahead and added an ICE impact settings to it, which I'll go over. So here, the only modification I made was just add this ICE impact object to it, which has its own box collider, and you want to untick use hierarchy management as before, just to avoid any transform oddities. Now here I set the force type to explosion because it's going to be erupting from the ground, but it has a very small explosion radius, so that really only affects things right next to it or right on top of it. And its layer mask is actually missing, but that's fine. We'll get rid of that. So it will only, this layer mask means that it'll only impact with game objects that are on the layers listed here. So here it's only the default layer that this will affect. It won't affect anything else that's not on the default. And damage type is set to direct, so it'll send a direct damage to anything that impacts with it, and it'll send 20 damage. So the player will take 20 damage every time they get hit by one of these things. All right. So that's pretty much just the projectile here. So I will actually go ahead and move this into our prefabs folder. New folder for ICE projectiles, or could do special effects since this is pretty much what it is. I'll go ahead and rename this so it's easier to find once we are assigning it. There we go. And we can actually just remove this from the scene because it will be used as a prefab. All right, so now what we need to do is we need to set up the ranged weapon to use this. And so what we're going to do here is we're just going to set this ranged weapon up in the root here. So I will create an empty, and I will call this special attack. There is no Y in attack. And we're going to have to kind of make a little bit of a guess here as to where because this will be the origin point of that special attack. So it's going to go forward from this point, ideally, if we set it up right. So we'll move it a little bit in front of the golem, so that the golem doesn't accidentally hit it or get hit by it. And this is why it has a basic attack for when the player comes within this range, because then it can't actually affect the player with the special rock attack, because the player's too close. Save that off. Okay, something bad happens. All right, so here what we want to do is we want to add a ICE ranged weapon to it. And as I said before, untick the use hierarchy management. So here we have a lot of different options. We could do primary weapon, but in reality, all this is going to do is spawn an effect. So it's not like your typical ranged weapon where it will actually use ammo or things like that. But what it will do, and let me see if I can find that, is use an effect. So what we do want to do is we want to enable the primary weapon. We're not going to activate any of these, just the last one, the effect. So here what we want is to add our reference, which is actually not going to be this thing. It's actually going to be, in this case, there are magical effects here. Earth fissure. I do believe, yes, earth fissure. Although what we're going to do is just rename this to ICE Earth Fissure, because we are going to have to modify it, and I don't like modifying the base stuff. So we need to, because this is actually using the wrong FX spawn, we want it to use the ICE one that I created. ICE Earth obstacle here. That's what we want. There's a bunch of little neat little things here too, but for now we're just going to set it at the default. Basically what this script does is it'll spawn 7 of these ICE Earth obstacles in a line, and it'll space them out by 1.2. So frequency is basically the spacing between the obstacles. And I'll leave those at their normal settings there. And then what I will do is set this up in the prefabs. Not even gonna bother making a folder for this. And then we will assign this to the reference. And this thing is actually going to destroy itself immediately, so we don't even have to worry about setting the lifetime. And we want the exact offset type, because it's going to be spawning right there. And its spawn point is itself, so you can set up different spawn points. Like, as an example, you could assign the creature ranged weapon to the base golem. But for organization purposes, I decided to assign it to a empty game object so that I could easily find it without having to click through everything to find out where that script is assigned at. All right, so that's effectively all we have to do with the primary weapon here. In other videos, I will go over setting up a proper ranged weapon. that uses ammunition and things like sound and shells and whatnot. But this is just using an effect primary ranged weapon. All right, so we got that set up. And minimize all those. All right, so now we can go ahead and start adding in interactors for him. So we need to add one interactor, enable it, and we want to set it to interact with the rigid body first person controller. And in this case, this will be like his initial sensing the player type thing. So what he will do is walk towards the player. So we want him to be the player to be within the field of vision. So we tick this box here. And has to be visible. So the player can't be hiding. This way the golem won't attack a hiding player just because they're within the golem's field of vision. Don't want him seeing through walls and whatnot. And we don't need the selection range because the player has to be within the field of vision, which by default, since we set it up, only has a range of 30. So since we have field of vision marked, we don't necessarily need the selection range here set. An angle is fine. Yep. All right, so let's set up a new one. This will be for when the player is within range of his rocks. So we'll assign the behavior to use special attack. In this one, we do want to change the selection range, and we also want these ticked as well. So we want the selection range to at least, this will take some playing around with based on the range of the rocks that are thrown. So I'm actually going to set this at about 7. Selection angle is fine. And I do not believe that we need anything else. Absolutely need anything else anyway. Oh, priority. Let's set priority to be about 50. All right. So just with these, we will go into behaviors, special attack. So in this behavior, what we want to do is trigger the ranged weapon to fire off. So what we want to do is we want to go to enable these events here. And we want it to be at the end. Or rather, here we go. What we need to do is find where in the animation, in seconds, that the golem hits the ground. So let us go to the special attack here. Bring this up. Kind of scrub through it right about there. So that looks like maybe 1 second, a little over 1 second. Yeah. So let's grab our golem. And we'll just put it at about point, what? 1.01, I think. 0.05, possibly. Try that for now. And what we want is we want the method name to be Special attack ranged weapon fire one shot. Because we don't want him going off rapid firing these things. That would be overkill, and probably, since their particle effect, complex mesh particle effects, might cause some performance hit there. So that ultimately, I believe, should be all. So let's go ahead and actually test this, see what he does. Oh my gosh, no, go away. Well, how did I end up way over here? This is not where I started. Oh, alright, I see what that issue was. Alright, so what actually happened is that ICE spawned a second character controller. So we need to actually turn that off. So we don't want it pooling. I mean, we could, but for now, we're not going to do that. So that should solve that problem. Yeah, there we go. All right. Now we just got to find the ICE Golem. Or the, where did he go? Huh. Where you at, bro? Alright, so he's under the ground. This is not at all what we wanted. Did we actually assign it? No, we did not. That would be why. We did not assign the terrain to the terrain layer. So that would be why he did not actually follow the terrain. So let's try this again. There we go. Well, that sort of worked. Oh, that hurt. All right. So we got some tweaking issues that we got to solve. Animation is a little bit choppy, and he did not play the whole attack animation. So what we can do is find the length of this, which is about 3 seconds. And so we want him to play through the entire special attack animation at least once. So we want to set the retaining timer to 3 seconds. So activate the retaining timer for the special attack and set it to 3 seconds. This will force him to stay with this behavior until 3 seconds have passed, ensuring him to play the entire animation before moving on. Let's check his animations right quick. So the loop time is active. No, get back up. See the walk. Set the loop pose there as well. And I'll go ahead and loop the idle as well. And see if that helps with that little bit of jumpiness in his animations. Yeah, much better. And that was more like it. Come here, buddy. Well, got some issues there. He didn't actually play the animation then. So I do believe that is where we want to actually have him loop. Set, go find that here, animation, and set it to loop. Because he's not playing it over again. Just checking those, see if we could use those in place of the events as well. Doesn't look like it though. All right. So let's go make sure that that attack animation, attack 2, is set to loop as well. And play. All right. So there are some other issues there. Now, one thing I'm going to introduce in this one is the concept of kind of animation scripting, where you attach special events to animations at certain points during the animations, and those events cause things to happen on the creature. That's effectively what we're going to be doing to controlling colliders for his fist when he smacks the player, because we don't want that collider to be active until he's actually going to be swinging at the player. Because otherwise it might interact weirdly with other things while he's walking around. But we can also use that to kind of control when the special attack fires off. And we can actually have an animation tied to the particular point when he actually slams into the ground. That way we don't get those odd effects where the attack goes off in a delayed fashion, or the animation finishes at a delayed fashion and it just doesn't sync up very well. So for the purposes of this, I'm going to create a C# script here, which will control the ranged weapon, the special attack here, and control when it fires off. No. Whoops, should not have clicked off. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create C# script, and I will just call this Golem. Come on, load. There we go. And I will actually go ahead and undock this. Here. All right. So there's a few things we need to do this. Is we need to use ICE dot creatures, and we need to store the ranged weapon. So we need to, for this case, we'll do public ICE ranged weapon. And we'll call this special attack. And let that compile. And we'll assign this to the ICE Golem. Go in here and assign the special attack to this field. Get rid of all these because we won't need them. And then we want a public. Actually, technically, this could be private. So I'm going to private void special attack. Just call it special attack. Now what this will do is cause the special attack to fire off. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go into the special attack dot, I think it is fire, ranged fire, weapon fire, one shot. And then just call that method. That's all it's going to do. And then we'll add other scripts in here as well. So now what we want to do to actually get this to work, what we want to do is we want to go into the Golem, grab his animation, and attack 2 here, and extend this events tab here, and then scrub through the animation. Don't play it, scrub through it, man. Find where his fists hit the ground right there and add an event by clicking this button here. Now we want the function name, which will be special attack. Now what this does is it calls the special attack function on any of the scripts that are on the Golem. In this case we should only have one, but do note that this will try to call it on all the scripts that are on the ICE Golem. So if you have them elsewhere and they do different things, you might want to keep that in mind. And then hit apply. Obviously right there. So now we have that set up. Now what we can do, and what we should do to avoid some issues, is go into the behaviors, find the special attack, and get rid of the event. We're not using it anymore. Instead, we're going to be using the animation event that we just set up. So let's press play and see if that works as intended. Come on, buddy. Yes. That worked much better. Hang on, I have a phone call. So now that we got that pretty much working the way we want it to, the only real issue with the way he's set up right now is you notice that especially at the start, let's see here. That is just caused by the one that we actually have in the scene that we forgot to get rid of. Let's see if he does it. Oof. That hurts a lot. It's really, he sometimes behaves oddly. And there's ways that you can fix that, but for now we're just going to go ahead and continue on and make it so, because there's a number of other things that we want to do with him, is set up the animation for him to try to punch the player when he gets too close. We should also probably go into interaction because he's getting a wee bit too close. So we want to actually increase his selection range. Let's try, I want to say 9. Or better yet, 7.7. Yeah, got to get rid of that secondary fissure. Yeah, it's a little better. Now, what's interesting is he turns away right there, but that's just because the obstacles that just spawned right there are blocking his sight to us, because his sight line is actually drawn from his base. down by his feet instead of his head, which is something that I believe you can change as well. I've had some issues trying to change that before though, so. Alright, so let's set up his next attack, which will be his basic attack. Basic attack. And in range, he's got to be fairly close to us, so we'll say 2. And this one will not have a visibility check or a field of view check, because if we're that close, he's going to know we're there. Yeah. All right, so in order for this basic attack to actually work and do anything to us, we actually have to go into and find where his fist is. And I'm clicking in the game view. And I believe it's this fist here, which does the attack. So what we want to do is we need to find it in his hierarchy. That's his neck. And I believe that is his right. All right, so now what we want to do is we want to add a ICE creature body part and enable the impact option here. And we'll leave it at 10 damage. And as I said before, make sure the use hierarchy management, I can't stress this enough, is disabled. Now for this to actually register and hit the player, you need to have a some kind of collider on it. For this example, I'll just use a sphere collider and scale it down. And it looks about right.
Is Ryan's sandwich?
All right, so now, just like with the ranged weapon, what we're going to want to do is disable and re-enable this collider based on the golem's animations, so that he's not walking around damaging things like the ground or himself by accident. So we will go into our Golem script here. And create a new function. And we'll call this basic attack. Or here, better yet, toggle weapon. And we need to assign the game object for our weapon so that we can grab its collider. So what we'll call this, I don't know, fist. Let that compile. And then in toggle weapon, what we want to do, extra space in there, is do fist dot get component collider dot enabled is equal to the reverse. To what it is not. All right, let that compile. Alright, so now we just need to go into the Golem's animations again, find attack 1, scrub through, and here is about where he starts lowering his arm to hit the player. So we will go into the events, add this, and make sure to call toggle weapon. Hit apply, and then when he slams into the ground like that, we want to also call toggle weapon. So we need a second event there because he's no longer waiting to hit the player. Hit apply, and there we go. Now we want to make sure that this is disabled to start with. All right, so let's test that out. Get close to him. Come on. He does not want to be doing that, does he? Yeah, maybe I gotta set it to loop. Oops, that was the wrong one. Loop. And then make sure animation is also looping. You know what I'm going to do? I'm actually going to go ahead and get rid of the earth fissure that is in the scene. There, now he's attacking. Haven't actually assigned it. Silly me. Need to assign the fist. No, that was the right one. And you can see in the inspector here that since we have the actual fist object selected, you can actually see the sphere collider getting toggled on and off. And I just died. Killed by my own creation. So that's working. So now what I will do is actually go ahead and go over setting him up to use the A star. So what we want to do is we want to create an empty, call this A star, and then actually go into component, pathfinding. I believe it is Pathfinder, yes. All right, so once we have this in here, we can go to graphs and recast graph. I'm going to rename this to Golem graph. Make sure that only the area that he's going to wander in is covered by that blue, white wireframe box there. So that would be what, the Z-axis. We've got to decrease that, or increase it really. Bring it up. Over. And I'm actually going to go ahead and increase the size. Yeah, should do it. Go into save and load here, and start up cache. That way it's not scanning after every time we press play. And then we'll go ahead and generate the cache. Let it build out. And he builds the nav mesh. All right, so what we want to do with the golem then is add the ICE World Pathfinder adapter. And then as you see here, we need to add A star and ICC to our defines. To do this, what you can do is you go into project settings, and I do believe it is in player. Yes, right here. So we need to add in two new ones. We need to add in the A star. Actually going to lock this and open a new inspector tab so I can see what it said. We need to add in a star. And ICE CC, I believe. And save. Let's see if that fixed it. Now maybe there's a underscore and a star here. Or, of course, the other thing that you could do is identify as supported assets, which should add in the symbols that are needed. Yep. See, it was ICE A star. So I will actually go ahead and get rid of that one. Save it off. And we get these little bug errors here, but just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to comment those out so they stop causing problems. And make sure that there are no other errors. All right, come on, console. Clear. All right, so nothing permanent.
Another Republican decides she's not going to run because she's afraid she'll lose her position.
All right, so now back on the ICE Golem, we now have the ICE World pathfinding adapter that now shows up. And now we also need to add in a seeker. So we'll go to, with the ICE Golem selected, go to Component, Pathfinding, and Seeker.
How long have you been doing that? What time do you start?
And then one last thing that we have to do for it to actually work and use A star is go to Motion Pathfinding for the Golem and change the motion control from internal to custom. That should be all you absolutely have to do to get him to work with A star. I'll leave him alone so he can actually wander around a bit. Yep, so see, now he's using A star. So you can see he's green line there representing the pathing. And then in here, you can actually go ahead and add in the special A star modifiers to further kind of smooth out his pathfinding and things like that. So for now, I will go ahead and end the stream here. And in another stream, maybe we'll go through and refine him a little bit more. And at a later date, I will release a video, not a stream, of setting up Final IK for him. All right. So thanks for watching. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can go ahead and either post them in the comment section of the video, or you can post them in the ICE Unity forums. So until next time, see you later.